You're good.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the International Jazz Day program. I would like to welcome you to this panel discussion, and I would like to welcome our live audience with International Jazz Day organizers from around the world who have been our dedicated partners these past years. You are the one who are making this a truly global celebration of culture and peace. You are the heart and the soul of International Jazz Day, and you inspire us with your commitment to jazz, and we're grateful for your partnership. Thank you for being here with us. International Jazz Day was created by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization 9 years ago through an initiative of UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador and jazz legend, Herbie Hancock. It is a way to unite through music, and in the spirit of UNESCO's mandate, it is a day to build peace in the minds of men. Today, given the unprecedented circumstances of the pandemic, International Jazz Day is a virtual celebration of human resilience and is being honored all over the world. Our program is being carried out in the 6 official languages of the United Nations. We dedicate this virtual International Jazz Day to those who are suffering from this pandemic and to those who have lost their dear ones. We thank the medical workers and the essential workers who are keeping us all safe. And while many of us are separated for now, we are together as a global community through jazz. And now I would like to introduce the moderator for this panel, Mr. Nate Chinen, who will be introducing our distinguished guests. Mr. Chinen is Director of Editorial Content at WBGO, Chief Jazz Contributor to NPR Music, and the author of Plane Changes, Jazz for the New Century. Nate is a 13-time winner of the Helen Dance Robert Palmer Award for Excellence in Writing, and he's a former music critic for the New York Times and a longtime columnist for the Jazz Times. Thank you, Nate, for being here with us.
Thank you, Mika.
The floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much, and welcome to everyone who's watching now and who is joining us for this panel discussion. I've been looking forward to it for quite some time, and I'm really pleased and proud to be a part of this International Jazz Day. So we have a lot of ground to cover, and I want to go ahead and bring in my fellow panelists, beginning with Sibongile Khumalo. So pleased to have Sibongile with us. She was born in Soweto, and she is truly a legend, a vocal legend, not only in South Africa, but around the world. Operatically trained, deeply distinguished on the classical stage, and also a truly amazing jazz vocalist. So Sibongile, thank you for being with us.
Nate, thank you.
And we are also joined by Marcus Miller, bassist, bass clarinetist, composer, producer, Grammy-winning artist, educator, and also UNESCO Artist for Peace. Someone that I've had the pleasure of observing in person at past International Jazz Day events. Hey, Marcus.
How's it going, Nate? Hey, everybody.
So I wanted to begin with what these days is not, is a real genuine question, a question with lots of layers. How have you both been, and what has it been like these past few weeks as we've been adjusting to these new circumstances?
Is it the question of ladies first? Okay.
Yes, it is.
It's been a very strange time. It's been very awkward to get up in the morning and think, oh, I actually don't have to get up. But also, I think, and weirdly, strangely enough, about a week ago, I heard for the first time that there's a phrase, cabin fever, and I never knew there was something like that. And to actually struggle a bit with that was quite awkward. But it's been also amazing to be home with family, with the grandchildren, with the children, and be able to catch up on things that one never actually thought were important. To see them grow taller in front of my own eyes has also been quite a thrill, I have to admit. And we've been told, yeah, no, you artists, you musicians, you know how to adjust yourselves. And I haven't been able to create a single song, not one line of anything. I've just been waking up. I don't know what you have experienced, Marcus, but for me, it's been like, okay, so this is what the walls of my house look like. Ah, okay. Yeah.
Well, for me, we're in Los Angeles, and we have 4 adult kids, 31 down to 25, who all live on the East Coast of the US in New York and DC, but they all decided to come home. So we got a full house over here. And like I said, they're all adults, but it's funny to see them all slip right back into their roles that they had in the house when they were kids. You know what I mean? This one gets on that one's nerves. That one teases that one. So it's really fun to watch. I don't know if my wife is enjoying it as much as I am, but it's very cool. In terms of music, I've been able to write some music. There's some film stuff that I've been working on. And, I really feel like it's important to get that kind of stuff done, because like watching film, streaming movies is like a lot of people's only thing to do now. So we really have to kind of keep that stuff going. But the other thing, and it's not just me, but most of the artists that I know, one guy just told me yesterday, I looked at my calendar, I was trying to see when the last time I was home this long without getting on an airplane. And he said, this is by far the longest time I've ever spent without getting on a plane, because, for a lot of us, that's our life, traveling from here to there. So for me, it's really nice to sit in one place for a little while. And like you said, discover different little pockets of your house, you know what I mean? And just see what's really going on here.
Yeah.
Another thing that has felt so strange to me, you mentioned not getting on an airplane. I haven't heard live music in a room, played professionally. I've heard it in my own house, but I spend for as long as I've been able to, I go out and hear music, several times a week usually, and it's been a strange thing to adjust to that. What has that been like for the two of you to not have that experience of physical proximity to fellow musicians and to audiences?
Well, I'll tell you, that's the most difficult part. We just did a song, a piece of music with the Monaco Philharmonic Orchestra. It's just kind of an inspirational song written by Donny Hathaway called Someday We'll All Be Free. It featured the orchestra, myself, Raoul Midon singing, and a bunch of all-star vocalists, and everybody had to do their part separately in their house. And it's the weirdest thing, it's a beautiful video. It's up now, but you just see a violinist in her living room, and one of the singers is sitting there with her cat, petting her cat and singing the song at the same time. So it's really a strange experience. But I think it's really going to make us value when we finally get to be in the same room with each other and being able to vibe off of each other, because I think we may have taken that for granted up until now.
Yeah, I agree with that. A colleague and I had decided that we were going to, and she's a singer, this woman, and we had decided we were going to try and put some vocals together to a hymn. Nothing crazy, nothing technically demanding, just a hymn. And for some reason, we just couldn't get the vibe going, because she was supposed to do it at her house, I was supposed to do it here. And yeah, it's been very odd But like you say, Marcus, you know, I suppose the value of being around people that you work with, of the being able to appreciate how important it is to have your bass player with you, your pianist with you, your drummer. Yeah, I was thinking about them, in fact, the other day, and I realized I haven't even spoken to them in all this time. And I was like, I need to find these guys and find out how they're doing, because, you know, it's very odd. I mean, one of the guys just recently got married, and I was thinking, ooh, what a way to spend your honeymoon. You know, but it's yes, not having that interaction, that I mean, we are social beings, right? So we need the love. We need to be able to develop. You may not touch somebody physically, but you want to be able to feel their energy. You want to be able to experience the vibration, as it were, that they give off to the music, to having a conversation at lunchtime, and just touching base on a human level.
Yeah.
I've missed that. I have missed that.
One of the worst punishments you can give a human being is to separate them from everybody else, right? Solitary confinement. And there are studies that show that your health declines just from being separated. Your immune system gets suppressed because I think, you know, at a very deep level, we're social beings.
Right.
And so that's why those music concerts, when you have musicians standing in front of hundreds, thousands of people, it's such a special thing. And that's why it creates that vibe. I'm sure, Sibongile, you've been in concerts where you can't explain. It was way more than just playing music for people. You know, all of a sudden you became like one organism. And I think that's a really unique experience that happens with music, with jazz in particular.
You know, that brings up, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, it's not just only jazz. I mean, you know, having sung, you know, in an opera here or there, that energy that you receive from an audience, that you're able to feed off, and it can never be the same way as it was in a rehearsal, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the rehearsal is one thing. You know, when you do those funny high notes, and you hit them, and the technique is there, I suppose. But once you have an audience, you forget. And I suppose that's the point about live music, is that you need to be able to do it in such a way that you even forget the music, because you know it so well, but also because the live audience is giving you this thing, if I may call it that helps you propel yourself to a particular goal. So yeah, that's been hard.
You know, given that International Jazz Day was set to happen in Cape Town this year, I've been thinking quite a bit about the way that jazz in particular has been an inspiration to people in terms of freedom movements, in terms of the fight for civil rights, the fight for justice and equality. Marcus, one of your most well-known compositions is Tutu. And Sibongile, I know that your family history and your own experience, you know, you've been deeply involved in cultural matters as well as in freedom movements. And so I wanted to talk about jazz's role in a social circumstance, and how, you know, in the past, jazz has been seen as a beacon of hope. And how does that apply to our current situation? How can we make it apply at this moment?
From where I am, I mean, you know, we come from a history, you will believe it or not, of the big band. We had big bands in the 30s and it's 2000 now, in the 1930s and 1940s, right? Big bands that were influenced by American big band music and so on. And it moved and it transmuted, it shaped itself, it shifted, but all the time, invariably, music overall, jazz in particular, it has always found itself, always had a place in the psyches of people, in the consciousness of people, because, you know, the music that is created deals with specific issues of the day. I mean, we have a Huma Segela, who was our biggest export. We have Abdullah Ibrahim currently, and we have so many other younger musicians. One of our most prolific pianists at the moment is Nduduzo Makatin, you know. And the interesting thing about what's happening currently is that it's not only just the social movement that jazz is able to find itself in, or maybe it is part of the social movement, but the thing is, people are getting past the, you know, these are the changes. Hey, dude, you must catch the changes. You know, you must remember to do this. And many musicians, younger musicians, are now beginning to trust the language that they have developed for themselves, a language that is based on the culture from which they come, not just, you know, this is the progression, or those are the progressions. So jazz becomes important in that way, because then it captures and of necessity has to capture what the people are thinking, what the people are feeling, what the people are experiencing. And I think it will be very interesting to see what's going to happen after this. You know, I okay, call me a prisoner of hope, but I can't imagine we're going to be stuck inside our houses. I've heard people talk of 6 months. Some have spoken of 18 months, and you're like, huh? What? Mm-hmm. However long it takes, when we get out of here, it'll be very interesting to see what comes out of people's creativity.
You know, with music in general, it just carries so much power. I think it goes to a different part of our brains. Music. I remember when Martin Luther King was assassinated here in the U.S. I was 8 years old and didn't know who Martin Luther King was until the day that he was assassinated, because my parents were so upset, and they began to explain to me what had just happened and who this guy was. I had to go to school, so I didn't get the whole explanation in that morning. But when I came back, I turned on the TV, and thousands of people on the television were just marching really slowly, holding hands. And they were singing, "We shall overcome," over and over again. And although I hadn't got the full explanation from my parents that day, that music and seeing those people all sing it together explained more to me than words could explain about who Martin Luther King was. And for me, that was my first experience at how important music is. Like I said, it goes to another part of the brain. The thing that makes jazz so interesting is that it's so immediate. You know what I mean? If you're a composer, you know, or you're in some kind of other realm, maybe you have to sit and write something to express or reflect what's going on. But in jazz, it can happen right there on the stage. And I've been feeling for the last 20 years that we haven't had a unifying event like World War II, which affected music and affected jazz. You you know, there's so many results in jazz from that war happening at the time. And civil rights in the 60s, that was another unifying event where jazz had to react. And like Sibongile was saying, this thing, if there was ever a unifying situation, a unifying event, this is it. So I'm really looking forward to also seeing what happens movement-wise with jazz, because jazz is really a reflection of the times. And I don't think you can get any event that's as strong as this to unify musicians.
And I'm so glad you said that, Marcus, because it's something I've been thinking of, you know, as soon as it became clear that we weren't going to be traveling to Cape Town this year, you know, I was thinking about how Jazz Day has been disrupted, but it very quickly occurred to me that the message of this event and the idea that Herbie and others articulate, and that Marcus, I think I've heard you articulate, that music is this language that enables communication across so many different kinds of barriers and artificial boundaries. You know, we are all in this together. And I want to actually share a quote. I spoke with Herbie a couple of days ago, and he put it as well as I think anybody could. So this is the words of Herbie Hancock. "This virus is showing us that we are a species. We are all human beings, and we all need to help each other, and we all need to work together. It's showing us in a way what we have in common. It's almost opening a pathway for what the future should be like." So I wanted to hear what you both thought of those sentiments. Herbie is always one to find the light and to reject the negative energies. But this idea that, as we've been shown how much we are all in this together, what pathways does that realization then open?
Marcus?
Well, I know that I played concerts with Herbie where I played a note that could not be described in any other way but as wrong, right? And I've seen Herbie just look at me and smile and create the most beautiful harmony against that wrong note. He's so, like you said, Nate, so positive. And yes, I think this pandemic is going to challenge our entire value system. You know what I mean? It's going to cause us, like we were speaking about earlier, it's going to cause us to value relationships, value proximity. It's going to cause us maybe to devalue money to a certain extent, with the economy getting jacked up like it is. So I think it is going to unify us in a very real way. And like Herbie said, at the end of it all, we are all a species, and that virus is showing us that very clearly.
And I guess I would add to that that it's also teaching us to be, just to be, because a lot of the time we're always chasing, especially for us musicians, we're always chasing. You were talking about getting on an aircraft, getting into your car, rushing to a gig, to a recording session, to just always rushing somewhere. And we're having to take time to be human. And that's my sense of, if I may add to what Herbie has said about this, actually.
Another thing that, it's funny, I brought this up with Herbie and we were talking about improvisation, right? And Herbie makes the point that it's one of the most human things, improvisation. We're all, in a certain way, we're all improvising all the time. But especially because each of you has worked extensively in other forms of music, music that, unlike jazz, does not necessarily prioritize improvisation. I wanted to get your perspective on how that skill set, how that act is so vital to this moment that we're living through, because as I look around and I see stories of heroism, a lot of those stories really boil down to some kind of improvisatory, response. And so I wondered what parallels you would draw between improvisation within the music and improvisation, in our healthcare system and in our government response, and even, among people who are, just choosing to do one thing instead of another in a given moment.
It took me years to feel comfortable with improvising, right? Because of the strictness of the art song or the opera and so on. And even in traditional music, when you do your chants and things like that, it is not necessarily defined as improv, but in fact it is a kind of improvisation, not necessarily in the jazz mode, right? But what I learned is that precisely because you are with other people, it sharpens your intuition, because you need to be able to, yes, you're listening to the music technically, but there's a sense inside of you that needs to trust what you're doing and trust where you are going with the music that you're doing. So I imagine that, people in the healthcare system, especially that we are told nobody really knows what this virus is and how it's going to blow up. And with we get told we need X number of weeks for it to reach its peak. So which means as we move towards that peak, we need to find ways of helping people in those spaces, healthcare workers, doctors, scientists. They are having to find their feet as they go along. So I suppose it becomes, improvising becomes a critical part of it. I mean, the only thing that may be a bit challenging would be when we improvise so much that we forget where we started, where we came from, right? But to my mind, improvisation is probably one of the most critical skill set that may actually come in handy for many people at this time.
I think that a lot of people have the wrong impression about improvisation, especially in jazz. They think that these talented musicians just make something up on the spot, which essentially that's what it is, but they don't know how much you have to practice, how much information you have to accumulate to be able to go on stage or go into a recording studio and create something that millions of people could potentially hear by improvising. Your toolbox, your knowledge has to be so vast in order to just make some stuff up on the spot. And I think the parallel is that with these healthcare workers, they're really having to use their body of knowledge and what they do know. They don't know everything, but they have to use what they do know to make decisions and try things on the spot. Improvisation keeps you really, really sharp, And the other thing that Sibongile said that's really important is that when you're improvising, you don't have an opportunity to second guess yourself. You have to trust that what you feel like doing at that moment has validity, it has value. And I think that's really an important element for these people who are trying to help us deal with this situation. You have to trust that all this knowledge that you've accumulated, you can put it together to try to find solutions.
Yeah, those systems of insight and training are that's the sort of invisible part of the whole equation for so many people, right? All that time spent studying, learning, practicing, both as an individual and then, with your, fellow musicians, it's interesting to me to think about. I don't know, but maybe this moment is one where we can try to communicate, what actually goes into all of that, and at the same time, what it comes down to, as you've both noted, is connection, right? Human connection. So to that end, I want to ask also about technology right now. The three of us are in far-flung places in different time zones, and we've seen a lot of connection being made via live streams. Marcus, you mentioned that recording project with Raul. Jazz at Lincoln Center did a very cool thing called Quarantine Blues, basically like a Zoom multi-track video. So we're seeing lots of innovation in that way. And I wonder, what do you think the implications are for the music? Like, does this seem like an avenue that we will be exploring for a while? Does it feel simply like a stopgap measure to you, or do you think there's actually some kind of fruitful result that will come out of these experiments?
Well, I think that we, in other forms of music, the technology has really, really influenced the music. Technology influences music all the time. I mean, beginning with a microphone, okay, so that people who are not right up on you can hear what you're doing, all the way to the ability to record music, the ability to record music discreetly, where the bass is on one track and the trumpet's on another track, and you can later on decide how loud each instrument should be. So technology has always been like connected to the music. So R&B records, it's rare on an R&B record that the musicians are playing at the same time. You know what I mean? Pop records, the same thing. Jazz has resisted that for obvious reasons. I mean, the whole thing about jazz has been musicians kind of vibing off of each other in the same space. But it's even, the technology has even affected jazz. I mean, I know that Miles Davis was making records in the 70s where they were playing for 30 minutes, and then Tio Macero, Miles's producer, had to cut the stuff up and create more tight compositions within it. I think now, today, the technology is unavoidable. I mean, this wasn't possible just 10 years ago. What we're doing now was not possible. And so we're staying connected. I mean, if this were 10, 20 years ago, we would have no idea what's going on in other parts of the world, or we'd get all the information 2 weeks later. So I think that the technology is really, dependent on the creativity of the musicians, which is always important. I think it can be used to create something really special.
Do you agree, Sibongile? Does it seem
Yes,
like there's promise there?
I do. I think, and I think that it also depends on how willing, as musicians, we are to make technology work for us rather than the other way around. Because sometimes, I'm just thinking of what young DJs do, for instance, and we have a kind of music here at home called or whatever. I don't even know how it goes properly, but then when you listen to this stuff and you're thinking, but where's the creativity, right? For instance, and it's just a sound that carries on and on and on. However, as a musician, how willing are you to make technology work for you? How willing are you to allow it to help you expand your own vistas? as a creator, and I guess that's part of the challenge, really, to make that is part of the challenge, to make it interesting, because a lot of time, we do resist change as people, right? We go like, I don't want to know, I'm not interested, and it becomes a problem, because then you could easily go extinct, you become irrelevant, and I know music goes in cycles, fashions come and go, they change all the time, but we need to, there is a part of me that accepts the fact that we need to adjust. It's not always easy, but technology gives us an opportunity to do that. I hope my son is not listening to this, because then I know he will want to know, Ma, when are we doing this?
We've got Herbie Hancock, right, who created this International Jazz Day. I don't think there's any better example of somebody who stayed open and figured out a way to manipulate the technology to enhance his music. And I think, Sibongile, your point is really probably the most important point. In the end, it comes down to the artist and what they do with the technology. Do they let the technology guide them, or do they guide the technology?
Sure. I do believe that.
We've been receiving some questions from people watching the stream, and so I wanted to read a few of them. I'm sort of curating them as we go, but one that I think ties into that last point. We talked about live music and when that's going to return. So there's a question from Suriname. When you're allowed to play music for an audience again, will that change? Do you think after this time that will have been changed? How will it be different? How will you perform? Will you offer it with more love, with more appreciation? That's the essence of the question.
Phew. Ask that question again. When?
Okay, I'm going to read it. I think I paraphrased poorly. So the question is, Marcus was just talking about appreciating live music. Will they play music in a different way as soon as they are allowed to do that? With more love? With more appreciation?
Marcus.
You know what? The answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is because, I don't know if this is true for all musicians, but I am eternally grateful when I stand backstage about to go on and play music for people who've taken time out of their lives to come and hear what we have to present to them, who bring all this energy and love. I've never, ever, and I can truly, honestly say this, I've never, ever taken that for granted. And so it'll be a continuation. Now, of course, there's going to be an extra level of acknowledgement of that. In other words, in my concert, I will absolutely have to get everyone to acknowledge that this is a special event and this is truly a blessing that we can share these moments together.
This question, I think, is very appropriate to International Jazz Day. This comes from Abhishek Badra at the Kathmandu Jazz Conservatory in Nepal. And I will read it now. For some of us, jazz, though it might be the music we play and love, is not our native music. In your opinion, what are the aspects of jazz that can be understood as a universal language, specifically in a folk or traditional music setting? And how can jazz musicians who find themselves in this situation, where jazz does not necessarily play an essential cultural role, uplift and inspire their communities during these difficult times?
You know, the most important thing that I try to convey to international musicians is it's really important for you to bring he was telling me when he first came to the US, he's trying to play like Dizzy Gillespie, you know what I mean? And he's trying to play like Miles. And he finally came to the US and met Diz, and he met Miles. And they said, man, stop trying to play like us. Do your own thing, okay? You've got something unique that the world needs to hear. Be you. And to Hugh
Marcus,
Masekela's
who are you talking to? I think you cut out just as you
oh,
were.
I'm sorry. So what I was saying was that Hugh Masekela.
Hugh Masekela.
And when Hugh first came to the US, he was telling me that he came ready to show Diz and Miles that he could hang with them, that he could play American jazz music. And while they appreciated it, they said, listen, man, stop trying to play like us. Do your own thing, you know? I think a lot of musicians, not just international musicians, a lot of musicians think that the goal is to play like whoever their hero was. But if you ever get to meet your hero, they usually advise you, hey, man, bring your own thing. Okay, that's what makes jazz jazz. Okay, you have to have your own thing. So I advise all international musicians, hey, man, if you're from Nepal, I can't imagine the combinations of your native music with jazz. And I would encourage people to do that.
And I think over and above the other elements to being yourself and doing your own thing is that what you bring to the language, to the vocabulary, which is based on your own thing, your own culture, is that you're building on something that is already there and you're making it bigger and brighter and better. So for me, that is probably one of the most critical aspects of holding on to who you are. I mean, Brahu, as we called him, always spoke about that. Hey, man. Never mind. But you always talked about that. You always referred to how Miles told him, no, dude, you know, be yourself. And I don't think. And I know that because he had the technical proficiency to play at that level, when he used the technical or drew on the technical language and the harmonic language and so on, and combined it with I'm just trying to think of a song. Bring back Nelson Mandela. Bring him back home. That's not American jazz, is it?
Mm-mm.
Or Kauleza, Kauleza, Kauleza. You immediately, as a South African, you immediately identify with that music. But then he stands there and he does those licks and he does that improvisation, and I'm thinking, oh my God, who is this guy? You know, and there are lots of other people who do that, who are like that. So yes, indeed, I agree.
That influenced us all. If Hugh had simply just played bebop like an American, he wouldn't have influenced. I mean, because all of us American musicians, when I was coming up in the next generation, we had to learn how to play that South African jazz style. Okay, and it was very important that matter of fact, it was an honor if you got a gig with Hugh Masekela because you could get it from the source, you know? And so all of a sudden, like you said, he added to the language.
That combination of total fluency in the tradition, the fact that he did come sort of ready to play in the American context, but then really, chose to foreground. I think Sibongile, you mentioned Nduduzo Makatini. He released an album this month, and I was looking forward to seeing him again this month, one of the gigs that got canceled. But I think about his music, and you hear so much the reverence he has for McCoy Tyner, for instance. You hear it; it's very clear, and yet you would never say, "Well, he's just playing McCoy Tyner." Like the cultural identity in his music is so clear and so strong, and I think it's that that's one thing that really reaches me about his music, is the fact that it really is this confluence, you know.
And it never feels as special, the music you grew up with. You know what I mean? It's like looking in the mirror, you go, that's just me. There's nothing special about that. Lots of times other people have to tell you, hey man, you come from, you know, wherever you come from.
Yeah.
I love that sound. You need to use that, man. That has value. So that's really where jazz starts to like help create you as a human being, shape you as a human being, because you begin to value what you have naturally. You begin to value what's around you. You know, Dizzy Gillespie went to Cuba and places like that. And it was the same deal. They wanted to play like this. Diz said, man, those rhythms you guys are playing are incredible. Next thing you know, whole Afro-Cuban element of jazz is created, you know, because Diz showed those musicians they need to value what they do, as well as learn the language of jazz.
Just going back quickly to introduce the example of introducer that you gave just now, Nate. The other interesting thing about Nduduzo and his generation, especially of instrumentalists, is that they draw on healing music, if I may call it that. I know music is music. Music heals, right? But when he talks of the underground, right, we're talking of an acknowledgement of the fact that he has been gifted by his ancestors, and he's not apologizing for that. You know, when we speak of ingoma is music, is sound, right? And sishaya ingoma. On the surface, you think, oh yeah, we make music. Literally, it means we make music, right? Sigiya ngengoma, we dance to music. But when you dance, when you gear, to gear is to stamp on the ground, right? So when you're stamping on the ground, who are you communing with? Who are you communicating with? Who are you drawing? Whose influence are you drawing on? And Nduduzo clearly, like another percussionist that I love so much, a young man called Tlale Makhene. You know, their music is so unapologetically ancestral music, if one may call it that, and yet the language, they draw on, they influence, what do you call it just now, Marcus? The fluency, you Nate said that, the fluency of the skill and right? But there is this other thing that they're bringing to this sound, which is clearly and proudly and profoundly of their ancestors. Music of the underworld, not the underworld, of the underground, you know, and it's important that, so I suppose it's a long-winded way of also responding to the last question that you had for us.
No, that's beautiful. And I think so vital, especially, you know, as it's hit very close to home for me in these past few weeks. You know, when we think about the culture of jazz, especially in comparison to other forms of music, so-called popular music as opposed to classical music, which is a pretty silly distinction. But, you know, jazz always really has a cherished place for our elders. And I think that that is related to what you're describing, Sibongile, because jazz is an African-American derived, you know, and birthed music. And so the role of the ancestors is important, continues to be important. And so this is one thing that I've been thinking about as we have lost some of our elders, you know, in recent weeks. The depth of that loss, but also the beauty of the continuing message, the way that we embrace that message and the way that we carry it forward. So I have
Very important. Very
Yes.
important. You know, very important to you know, for so long, African Americans, there was not a lot of history to look back on. You know what I mean? That's why in African American culture, it was always the latest dance, the latest beat, latest shoes. You know what I mean? Because all of our hope was in front of us, and behind us was a lot of pain. But now, in the last generation, we have this massive history, okay, that we can now look back on. Like Europeans look back on their history. We have this musical history of jazz, and it's very important that we honor that history and our elders, like you said, Nate.
Yeah, I agree.
So we have just a few minutes left, and I wanted to look forward now and think about, okay, so we're living through this time, and whether you're spending it woodshedding or, you know, perfecting your biscuit recipe, you know, or whatever it is, there will be a time when we are, you know, probably tentatively at first, and then hopefully, you know, fully re-entering circulation. And I wonder what you think artists, and I guess maybe the two of you specifically, what would, from this time, do you think you'll be carrying forward? How are we sort of re-emerging into the light, changed by this period of time?
My sense is that, you know, as human beings, we do tend to want to control things all the time. We want to direct things, which is okay. You know, we want to use logic all the time to shape whatever we are doing, and that is okay. But what I think we also need to acknowledge, perhaps, and learn, is to trust our own intuition about things, right? To trust the fact that if it doesn't feel right, chances are that it is not right. Mm-hmm. So Marcus referred earlier to second guessing ourselves. There's no time to be second guessing ourselves, but you have a sense, you have this thing in your gut that tells you this ain't right, this is not good, this is not working. And so I think as jazz musicians and as musicians and creators, broadly speaking, my sense is that we need to be a bit more intuitive about the things, or even about how we see things, because, you know, to want to say it's 1 + 1 = 2. Sometimes it may be 1 + 1 = 1 squared. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if it comes to you as 1 squared and not as 2, then look at that and work with it. That's my feeling. We're not going to. I mean, it's clear that things are going to change. Things are never ever going to be the way that they were before whatever date, in December 2019, right? Or January, February 2020. But there is a lot else to look forward to, that we need to trust ourselves, that we need to work with, that we need to embrace. There's been a lot of talk about embrace things with love, with gratitude, allow your vibration to work and operate at a certain level. We need to be, I feel that we need to work with things that we are given, we are gifted with, in a more actually, that's the word I was looking for. We need to be more conscious of our existence. We've sort of drifted along for too long, but be intuitive as well in how we allow our consciousness to guide us and direct us and shape our being. We haven't really been human enough, I don't think. We
That
need
is
to
so,
be
that's
human.
so beautifully put. I really appreciate that. And it, you know, it makes me think about that sort of flow state that I think each of you has described as well. You know, there's that sort of, musicians talk about that fabulous moment when the music and the audience and the band, like everything just seems to be a part of this flowing continuum. And there's a state of, you know, deep presentness and awareness, right? And Sibongile, you're sort of, if I'm understanding you correctly, you are extrapolating on that feeling to apply to our experience in the world. And you know, that feeling needs to be extended and captured, and we need to work with it.
I think so. I believe so. Marcus, do you agree?
Absolutely. That's the most important thing. On a more practical level, you know, everybody's saying to me, man, I can't imagine what you're writing during this downtime, bro. And I'm working on some film music, but aside from that, it's really hard for me because I don't have any deadlines, okay? And I'm realizing that part of what allows me to make a decision when I'm composing something or working on something, part of what makes me able to finish it, and I'm sure, Nate, you go through the same thing, is that I got to turn this sucker in, you know what I mean? And it really is part of the creative process, meaning I have to finish it because I got to turn it in, blah, blah, blah. So I'm starting to really value that. So I'm starting a lot of things and then walking away from it because it doesn't really matter if I finish it right now or not, you know what I mean? So I'm going to actually look at my deadlines and all that pressure with a different light once we're through all of this.
Just remember where you've left all those things that you started.
Yeah, I got them a little.
Is there anything? We have just a couple of minutes left, and you know, I'm sure that everyone watching this now will also be watching the Global All-Star concert. Is there anything that you are looking forward to? Anything you can share about what we're about to see, and even just the kind of the spirit behind that concert? I know, Marcus, you've played on a few of them now. Any final thoughts as we head towards the concert now?
It's going to be so creative, man, because everyone is performing at home. There's no kind of uniform direction that any of the artists got. Just play some music, you know what I mean? And so how you film it, where you film it, what you play, is all up to the artist. So I think we're going to see how true creative people can find different solutions for the same task, you know?
Yeah. It's always
Sibongile,
about...
like what will you be? Can you tell us what you'll be performing, or is that a secret?
Will I be performing, or is that a secret? It's a bit of a secret. I'll be performing, but slightly differently to how I normally do it. Yeah.
See, that's exciting. See, exactly.
And this is the best kind of secret because we don't have that long to wait.
Right.
It's coming up fast. Well, I want to thank you personally, and also on behalf of everyone who tuned in, on behalf of the Hancock Institute and UNESCO and everyone involved with International Jazz Day. You're both so inspiring, and I think you've given us a lot of information and insight to carry forward. So thank you both. And I wish you a happy and safe and, you know, productive, if you want it to be, time at home. And I also hope to see you in real time and in real space at some time in the near future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus.
All right. Take care.